I didn't used to believe in fate, but that changed. Hi, I'm Stacy. When I was 3, someone left me on the porch of a shabby orphanage on the edge of town. The only thing I had on me that hinted at my past was a medallion with a strange symbol and an inscription on it. Once in Paris. I kept trying to figure out what that meant for a long time, but eventually gave up. Climbing trees and sneaking out of the orphanage was much more fun than solving any riddle. When I turned 7, I snuck into the kitchen and I put green dye into our soup. Who did this? Ms. Jones, it was Stacy. That snitch's name was Eve. She was always ratting me out to Mrs. Jones, the head of our orphanage. One day, I stole a tablet from Mrs. Jones's office to play games with some of the other girls. Eve saw it and immediately ran away to tell on us. But I pounced on her from behind and knocked her to the floor. Eve grabbed my hair and I screamed and bit her as hard as I could. My ear! Stacy, you're grounded. Eve, I'll take you to the doctor. Mrs. Jones always took Eve's side. She couldn't stand me. However, the other kids treated me like a rock star. Oh, she pulled out a piece of your hair. You're so cool. By the time I turned 16, I'd become much more cunning, and Eve hardly ever caught me red-handed. One day, my friends and I decided to go to the city. After sneaking out, we wandered the streets and spent our savings on junk food. At some point, I saw an old lady. She was standing at an intersection, leaning on a cane and looking around uncertainly. I stayed behind and I helped her cross the road. By the time I came back, my friends were nowhere to be seen. I was hoping to catch up to them, but I wandered into a creepy alley and I got lost instead. Who do we have here? Good girl shouldn't walk alone. I'm not alone. Back off. They stepped to the side, and I saw their leader. At that moment, I felt like a heroine of a stupid romance novel. That bad guy was a couple of years older than me, and he was gorgeous. Oh, I had to get a grip on myself. Jeez, I almost forgot I was in trouble. The thugs started talking between themselves, and I found out their leader's name was Derek. When he came closer, I took a step back and I hit a wall. You're not getting away, baby. Now show us what's in your purse. His words made my blood boil. They wouldn't intimidate me so easily. Like hell I will. And I'm not your baby. You think you're very brave, huh? I jerked away, and they saw my medallion in the streetlight. Before I could do anything, Derek tore it off my neck. Hey, give it back! I wanted to pounce on him like a rabid cat. Where did you get this? That's none of your business. I was quicker this time. Before Derek could even blink, the medallion was back in my hands. I kicked the gang leader in the knee, and he howled with pain. Wasting no time, I ran away. And as I turned the corner, I heard Derek shouting after me. I will find you! I only breathed a sigh of relief when I finally reached the orphanage. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard hurried footsteps on the stairs and saw Mrs. Jones coming downstairs. Eve was standing behind her and giggling nastily. Oh, dang it. I was busted. You're washing all the dishes after dinner tonight. A week later, we went on a field trip to a museum. It was so boring I could hardly keep my eyes open. But when we were getting on the bus, I suddenly felt someone looking at me. I quickly turned and saw a shadow turning behind the corner. Do you need a special invitation? Feeling uneasy, I had no choice but to get on the bus. One day, I was hanging out in the orphanage backyard with my friends. I climbed up a tree and was hanging upside down from a branch when someone shoved a leaflet in front of my face. It was my best friend, Agatha. Look what I found. It says here there's a haunted house 30 miles from the city. Is this a joke? That's what I thought at first too. But then I Googled the house and it turned out it was real. It wasn't just a house, but an abandoned mansion. 13 years ago, there'd been a fire in it. There were rumors that the family living in it had been haunted by a ghost. Those who survived ran away to Europe. Do you think it's true? Well, let's go there and see for ourselves. No way! We got into so much trouble last. I'll go alone if you're too scared. Well, why don't you just stay the night there if you're so cool? Easy! Done. A couple of girls ended up joining me. We decided to go to the mansion and spend the night there. The rest of our gang agreed to cover for us. Before leaving, we took an old sleeping bag and a pair of flashlights from the basement. When I got back upstairs, I ran into Eve. What were you doing there? We're allowed to go down to the basement, you know. After that, I snuck into the kitchen to steal food for our trip. As I was stuffing my backpack, that snitch cornered me again. Why are you in the kitchen? Go see a therapist. You're paranoid. The next day, the girls and I snuck out of the orphanage and got a taxi. The driver refused to drive up to the mansion and dropped us off some distance away.
The road goes through the forest from this point. I don't want my car to get stuck.
As a result, we had to walk the rest of the way. At first, it was fun, but the further we went, the darker it got. There was no signal there, and the GPS was going crazy. I'm tired. Are we lost? Quit whining! All of a sudden, a shadow flickered among the trees. My heart skipped a beat. I felt like I was being watched again, but I pushed thoughts like that away. We walked a little further and finally arrived at the mansion. It looked like a castle. After the fire, part of the roof had collapsed, but one wing remained almost intact. We walked around and took a lot of cool photos. When night fell, we came to one of the undamaged rooms and got our sleeping bags ready. No one felt like sleeping, so we chatted and ate some snacks. At some point, a strange sound, like a howl, sounded outside the window. Was it a ghost? Nah, probably just a bird. To be honest, though, I was feeling uneasy. It was dark outside, and the mansion looked very gloomy and frightening. We heard the howling sound again, and then footsteps on the second floor. Did you hear that? Holy heck, I don't want to die. I took a flashlight and I went upstairs. It was probably just mice. I hoped we weren't sleeping in a room next to some homeless person. There was a room above us that we hadn't quite had the time to explore yet. I used the flashlight and I saw a crib in it. Did this used to be a nursery? I had a strange feeling, like a deja vu. And then a hand fell on my shoulder. Sorry for the cliffhanger. If you want to know what happened next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Private Diary channel. A hand fell on my shoulder, but it was just Agatha. Did you find anyone here? There's no one here. We came back and we went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a rustle. I opened my eyes and my blood ran cold. There was a guy leaning over me.
I told you I'd find you.
Derek? You psycho! My heart was pounding and I wanted to wake up my friends, but Derek put a finger to my lips.
If you don't scream, I'll tell you about your parents.
What the heck was he talking about?
Come on, I'll show you something.
His words about my parents got me hooked, and I decided I'd give him a second chance. Do something weird and I'll scream.
I'll keep that in mind.
When we went out into the hallway, Derek admitted that he'd been following me. It was him that I'd seen at the museum and earlier that day in the forest. He had also left the leaflet about the mansion on our porch.
I knew you'd grow interested in the mansion and come here.
Why? Instead of answering, Derek brought me to the nursery and told me that he grew up on a ranch nearby, so he knew everything there was to know about that mansion.
There was a rich couple that used to come here every year from France, the Lamars. They had a daughter called Anastasia. One day, they left her with a nanny and they went out. That day, there was a fire in the mansion and Anastasia died. So did the nanny.
Anastasia's parents didn't come back after that tragedy. Madame Lamar, Anastasia's grandmother, was the only one who didn't believe that her granddaughter had died. Some people thought that she was crazy. I mean, it's sad, but what does that have to do with me? Derek pointed at the crib.
See the symbol on the headboard? Doesn't it remind you of anything?
OMG, just like the one on my medallion. It turned out the same symbol was carved into the walls, stairs, and even above the fireplace. How had I not noticed it before?
This is the coat of arms of the Lamar family. When I saw that medallion of yours, I immediately recognized it. There used to be a portrait of Anastasia here, and she was wearing a medallion just like yours in it. You look exactly like her.
What are you getting at?
I think that girl survived. It's you.
You're nuts. I'm just an ordinary orphan.
You should at least try to contact the Lamars. Start with your grandma.
Why are you so invested in this?
I've been obsessed with the history of this mansion ever since I was a kid. Besides, can't I just want to help you?
I doubted it, but decided, what the heck? I'll contact the Lamars anyway. In the morning, we headed back to the orphanage. Luckily, Mrs. Jones didn't see us. I know you've been breaking the rules again. Prove it if you can. Eve didn't have any evidence, and she could only stew in anger. That evening, I was watching TV in the common room with the other kids, and I saw a news report about the arrest of a fraudster. She'd made a fortune robbing rich families. Stacy, if you don't change, you'll end up just like her. I didn't pay her any mind, and I stared thoughtfully out the window. Could the Lamars really be my family? The next morning, Derek met me by the orphanage. He said that the Lamars owned several vineyards and were famous because of that. He also showed me photos of each member of their family. At some point, Derek's friend came up to us.
Vince is a brilliant hacker. He found your grandmother's email address.
Derek took a photo of me with the medallion and sent the photos to Madame Lamar. Then he suggested we go for a walk around town. We wandered around the city center and drank milkshakes, and then climbed onto a roof and watched the blazing sunset. At some point, Derek told me a bit about himself.
My mom died, and my dad's addicted to gambling. He's almost never at home. I'm always working to pay off his debts.
Is that why you fell in with a bad crowd?
Yeah, but soon I'll turn 18 and I'll start a new life. I actually really like to draw. One of my teachers at school said I have talent.
I never thought you'd be an artist.
Hey, I promise, one day I will paint your portrait and it will be a masterpiece.
We started discussing the mansion again. It turned out Derek was the one who spread scary rumors about it so no one would come to the mansion and damage it. He even hung up empty bottles around so the wind would make howling sounds. So that's what that was! Our eyes suddenly met. As I looked at Derek, I realized how gorgeous he was again. After a second, he moved closer to me. Was he about to kiss me? I tensed up and turned away right at the last moment. The next few weeks flew by. Madame Lamar did not reply to the email, and Derek sent several more. We spent a lot of time together. One day, he even snuck into my room. Soon, the door to my room opened and Eve poked in. Gotcha! She ran away to get Mrs. Jones, but Derek quickly climbed back out the window. That guy was just here! Mrs. Jones? I have no idea what Eve is talking about. One day, Derek and I agreed to meet at a cafe. I arrived a little earlier than planned, and I accidentally overheard him talking to Vince.
Do you really think the grandma will pay? I told her I'd give her information about her granddaughter only after she transfers me money.
I don't think Stacy is really her granddaughter. It's been so many years. There are a lot of ways that she could have got her hands on that medallion. I was frozen with shock. That whole time, Derek had just been using me to get money. Derek and Vince suddenly noticed me.
Stacy.
Stay away from me! I never want to see you again. Derek tried to come up to me, but I pushed him away and ran, just like the first time we'd met. Except this time, hot tears were streaming down my face. When I came back to the orphanage, I ran into Eve and Mrs. Jones. See? I told you she keeps sneaking away to see a guy. I'm tired of your antics. Mrs. Jones locked me in a room. I was only allowed out to use the shower and toilet. They left me food by the door. I felt gutted by the realization that I didn't have a family after all. I was a moron to have tried to believe in a miracle. One day, I was sitting in that room when I heard some noise on the ground floor. Everyone seemed to be discussing something. When I looked out the window, I saw an expensive car at the gate. Had a sponsor arrived? Soon, Eve came to see me. Go to Mrs. Jones's office! What did I do now? Eat the last bowl of porridge? When I walked into the office, I saw an amazing scene. Mrs. Jones was standing in front of a woman looking tense. Please give us some privacy. After Mrs. Jones left, the stranger turned around. I gasped in amazement. It was Madame Lamar. I recognized her from the photos Derek had shown me. Madame Lamar looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my neck. May I take a look at your medallion? I hardly knew what to think. Are you here because of Derek's emails? Honey, I haven't read those in ages. You wouldn't believe how many people lie about finding my granddaughter over the past 13 years. But why are you here then? I saw a news report about the arrest of a scammer. I recognized her as the nanny who died in the fire with Anastasia. I immediately remembered the evening where the girls and I were watching TV. I had seen that report too. After that, I found out what happened 13 years ago. The nanny and her accomplices took all the money and valuables from the mansion. Then she set fire to it, faked her own death, left Anastasia at an orphanage, and ran away. She wanted to get back at my son because she was in love with him, but he rejected her and stayed with his wife. Madame Lamar came up to me and gently touched my cheek. There were tears in her eyes. I felt a familiar smell, and I got déjà vu again. The smell. Peppermint oil. I remember it. It really is you, my little Anastasia. Madame Lamar, or rather, my grandmother, hugged me tight. But Why did my nanny not take my medallion? I think she was in such a hurry to escape that she forgot about it. When the orphanage found out I had a rich family, Mrs. Jones' attitude immediately changed. Stacy, remember how much we loved you? I cared for you like you were my own daughter. Why did you get so lucky and not me? I hate you! While Eve was throwing a tantrum, I smiled at her sweetly. Grandma wanted to take me to Paris. But before we left, Vince suddenly came to me. I need to tell you something. What Derek and I were discussing, it isn't what you thought. Things have changed, Vince. I sent another email to Madame Lamar yesterday. I don't want her money anymore, and I told her about Stacy. Here's the email. Derek changed his mind because he fell for you for real, Stacy. Vince told me that it had been Derek's birthday the day before. He bought a train ticket and was about to move to another city. I didn't know what to do, but when Grandma and I were on the way to the airport, I asked the taxi driver to stop the car, took a different taxi, and drove to Derek's place. I was too late. When I arrived at the platform, Derek's train had already left. It seemed we just weren't meant to be. My grandmother and I arrived in Paris, and I met my parents. They insisted on a DNA test, and after that, there was no doubt I was their daughter. I found a loving family I'd always dreamed of. My relationship with my grandmother was particularly warm. Soon, I transferred money to the orphanage that I grew up in. Several times, I bought tickets for all my friends, and they came to visit me. We have a new head of the orphanage now. Eve tried to suck up to him, but it didn't work. A year later, I was walking around Paris when I saw an art exhibition. The visitors were all whispering that the artist was a rising star. I was looking at one of the paintings when I realized I was looking at myself. The next second, I heard footsteps behind me and felt hot breath on the back of my neck. You painted my portrait after all.
I promised, didn't I?
I didn't used to believe in fate, but that changed once in Paris.